For the past 5 months, I've been on multiple missions to Myanmar to find out more about what is happening in the country. While on this mission, I found a vast amount of information about their history, politics, economics, violence, the influence of NGOs and corporate entities, as well as the effects that globalization has had on the country. Myanmar is a developing nation that has a history of coups, colonization, and violence. Although this is the case, it is a richly diverse country that is home to many different cultures and belief systems. After these 6 missions, I've gained great insight into what has happened and continues to happen within the country. The first mission to Myanmar was in order to figure out some of the history of the hotspot. While I was there, I had the chance to chat with people who grew up and lived through uprisings and obtained access to an archive of information that pertained to the British colonial rule over Myanmar, which was then called Burma. In these archives, I found out that the British colonial rule over Burma in the 19th to 20th century had a massive effect on the future conflicts within the country. As I mentioned previously, Myanmar is a very diverse place with many different cultures. However, for a long time, that diversity was unwelcome, and many groups of people were villainized for being in the country. During this time and all the way up to modern day, Myanmar has been a primarily Buddhist country. Because of this, it meant that groups of other belief systems were discriminated against by much of the Burmese population. According to these archives, the Burmese were trying to free themselves from colonial British rule. During World War II, sided with the Japanese in the fight against the British. However, the British were recruiting Rohingya Muslims in the fight against the Japanese, and this caused an even greater divide between the many cultures of Myanmar. Eventually, Myanmar became free of British colonial rule in 1948, and political instability increased. Many insurgencies popped up, and nationalism in Myanmar skyrocketed. Due to this increased nationalism, they were willing to do whatever it took to preserve their lifestyle and culture. This led them to believe that the Rohingya Muslims were as big of a threat as their former British colonizers. The post-independent life of the Myanmar people led to a number of conflicts, including one which lasted from 1948 to 1962. During this conflict, the two main groups were the Communist Party of Burma and the Karen Nationalists. These two groups both aided in the fight against the British during their quest to gain independence. However, after gaining independence, the relationship quickly turned sour after the Communist Party of Burma engaged in a conflict in Pakyongi. This was all due to the fact that the Karen Nationalist Union preferred an independent state that was looked over by the Karen people. The Communist Party of Burma did not agree with this. However, the Karen Union had clear control, which led to regional autonomy under a federal system. This government lasted for only 3 consecutive parliamentary sessions, but eventually General Ne Win and the Myanmar Armed Forces started a coup and replaced parliamentary power with military power. During this reign of military power, accusations of human rights violations were raised and ethnic minorities were being persecuted for no reason. Due to this, the minorities started forming rebel factions, which led to more minorities being killed. Eventually, General Ne Win held peace talks, which fell through, and he founded the Burmese Socialist Party in 1974, and the nation was declared a one-party state. Consequently, Myanmar became one of the most underdeveloped countries in the world. This lasted until 1988, when mass student protests broke out in retaliation to the 26-year dictatorship of Ne Win. Ne Win's government was overthrown in September of 1988, and the State Law and Order Restoration Council took over and made peace treaties with insurgent groups. However, the ethnic groups received no support from the government, and the ethnic insurgencies were taken out. Most of them disappeared by the 1990s. This leaves us where we are today, with many of the minorities of Myanmar receiving no support and in many cases still being attacked. A short time later, I returned to Myanmar for my second mission. I realized the history of violence in Myanmar has shaped the current government that exists today within the country. After some conflict in 2006, which resulted in even more violence, a parliament republic was created in 2008 after a new constitution was drafted. The branches that currently exist are comprised of legislative, executive, and judicial. The country is now made up of 7 states that are based on ethnicity. These include the Chin, the Kachin, the Kiyin, the Kaya, the Mon, the Rakhine, and the Shan. Although there is a new government in place, many British colonial laws still apply. For example, citizens are not guaranteed right to a trial if they commit a crime, or in many cases, the ethnic people don't even have to commit a crime to be persecuted. I spoke with many people of the country on my second mission to find out who's leading their country and what they are like. I found out that the current leader of the country is President Win Myint, who was elected in 2018. However, one of the most important and influential leaders is Aung San Suu Kyi, a state councillor of Myanmar. Aung San Suu Kyi is a Nobel Peace Prize winner and one of the most and one of the main people responsible for helping bring democracy to Myanmar. She has also been accused of perpetuating the crisis and playing a key role in backing the attacks against the ethnic groups. It is clear that democracy in Myanmar still doesn't mean freedom for everyone. Myanmar is considered to be a weak state because of the conflicts that are ongoing in the country. The biggest conflict in the country seems to be the persecution of the Rohingya people by the Myanmar government. It seems clear that the oppression and nationalism from the past have carried over into modern-day Myanmar. I returned to Myanmar sometime later for my third mission in order to find out about the violence and human rights violations that are being committed within the country. While I was there, I learned some disturbing truths. I decided to take a trip to the Rakhine State to see what was happening for myself. I got the opportunity to talk with some of the few Rohingya Muslims left in the area. I found out that in 2017, Myanmar security forces claimed they were trying to bring stability back to the western region of the country. Eventually, violence erupted that caused mass movement amongst the Rohingya people to leave the region. The government responded to this by claiming the Rohingya Muslims as a terrorist organization and launched ruthless military campaigns in order to destroy as many Rohingya villages as they could. This forced around 700,000 Rohingya out of Myanmar. According to some of the sources I've talked to, it's estimated around 6,700 Rohingya Muslims were killed within just the first month. It is also said that Myanmar's military allegedly opened fire on a crowd of civilians who were trying to flee, as well as placed landmines near border crossings in order to ensure they could not escape to Bangladesh. Bangladesh is the goal for many people fleeing the Rakhine State because that is where they can find a safe haven. It is estimated there are now around 860,000 Rohingya refugees because of this crisis. Prior to the crisis, Rohingya Muslims were not even considered citizens and had few rights, and because of this, they are considered stateless people. Due to this fact, there's an organization that fights for the rights of the Rohingya Muslims. I was told they were referred to as the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. The Myanmar government classifies them as a terrorist agency and has been responding to them by taking preventative measures such as placing bombs surrounding the borders of the Rakhine State. The Rohingya still have no right to nationality, health, religion, or participation in public life. It is clear that this is an issue that has little chance of ending soon. I returned home knowing I would return one day in order to learn more about the country and what it's going through, and maybe how I could possibly help Myanmar. Before I returned from my fourth mission, I did some research on what NGOs are currently doing work there already. While doing this, I found out there are other drastic issues going on within the country, and these are some of the NGOs that are currently working with the country and bringing aid. Most of these NGOs have a home base in the city of Yangon, and a lot of the NGOs are run by Myanmar nationals just hoping to make their country a better place. One of the largest NGOs is PACT, and they've been doing work there since 1977. Currently, PACT staffs around 3,100 people working within the country. PACT's biggest influence is that they are the first globally recognized NGO to make microfinance loans in Myanmar. PACT also became known for increasing access to quality healthcare services to the people of Myanmar. Population Service International is another organization that does work in Myanmar and has been working there for about 20 years. Population Service International largely focuses on HIV, AIDS, malaria, pneumonia, diarrhea, and improving reproductive and maternal health. PSI delivers medical supplies to places in Myanmar and is present in all of Myanmar's 331 townships. They currently have 8 field offices which are used as bases for those 331 townships. The final NGO I found was World Vision, which is a Christian relief fund. They focus on development and support for children. Having been there for over 30 years, they work to help increase education, health, and economic development. World Vision currently has 129 projects going across 11 of the states in Myanmar. After learning more about these organizations, it was time for my fourth mission to Myanmar. I needed to go back to find more about the influence that not only the NGOs have, but the influence that the corporations have on the country. I traveled to the Thiwala zone and found out that many countries have investments in this area. A vast sector of their economy relies on corporations that produce goods such as toiletries, clothing, appliances, and car parts. Most of these products are produced in Myanmar's Thiwala zone, which only opened in 2014 and was a product of both Japanese and Burmese investment. The zone was built to challenge Vietnam as one of the key producers of goods that are sent off to China and the United States. While I was there, I came to find out that Gap, Coca-Cola, and Ford have all invested in the area. one of the main investments being from Coca-Cola to build a $200 million bottling plant, which ended up creating 22,000 jobs in the Yangon area. Likewise, Ford invested in car production plants, and they also invested in training local technicians, which will further expand Myanmar's economy by creating many jobs. Not only are there investments in creating production plants and the creation of jobs, but a lot of outside investment also goes into the oil and gas industry within Myanmar. Due to this, the Myanmar Oil, Gas, and Enterprise is the most powerful in-house corporation because of the amount of money they are bringing into Myanmar. After my mission, I traveled home and realized globalization was truly having an impact on Myanmar, but I knew I needed to return to figure out how big of an impact it was actually having. A month later, I returned to Myanmar to finish figuring out the impact of globalization on the country. I managed to get access to government documents to find my answers. I came to find that the shipping revolution and technological advances are slowly starting to work for the country. As far as the shipping revolution goes, the shipping trade in Myanmar has been growing steadily every year, countries like China, India, North Korea, and Russia being the main import and export trade partners. In 2007, Myanmar developed the Myanmar Merchant Shipping Act, stating that any shipment between two smaller countries has to be approved by the government. This act has been growing the economic value of Myanmar because of increased trade between Myanmar and any respective country. In 2014, Myanmar experienced their highest GDP of all time, $8 billion. Technological advances have also been happening in Myanmar, with the majority of them being in the agricultural sector. As well as the growing market of telephones, telecom industries have moved in and started building towers to rise the growing industry. Myanmar is currently one of the fastest growing economies in the world due partly to globalization and foreign direct investment. I went back to Myanmar a month later, and I decided to check out the effects of globalization levels 3 and 4. I talked to more people in charge of financial sectors, and they told me much of the same. As far as level 3 goes, I mentioned before, lots of corporate entities have already started outsourcing to Myanmar, since they have opened their new economic zone, and since it's relatively new, it seems to be working thus far. As far as globalization level 4 and the dependence on other economies and their investments, the leaders of different financial sectors have said that a lot of investment is coming from foreign entities like the companies Ford, Gap, Coca-Cola, and PepsiCo. So I came to realize, although Myanmar has just started to enter the global economy within the last decade, they have already become intertwined in it. The developed world may not rely on the developing world, but the developing world clearly relies on the developed world to make proper investments. After my mission, I realized the United States is much like Myanmar in the sense that we are both incredibly diverse countries with the potential to be accepting of all cultures and belief systems. I couldn't help but think that the United States can make a real difference. The main answer to this issue is that the Rohingya people need to be able to return home without facing fear of state-sanctioned violence, and to be able to gain proper rights they need, such as nationality, health, education, religion, and participation in public life. The United States has the ability to play a key role in making this happen. So I call on Joe Biden to recommend how we can finally solve this atrocious situation. In 2016, the United States dropped the remaining sanctions that were placed on Myanmar, and only a year later they committed this human rights crisis. We must make it known to Myanmar that this change can be reversed, and we need to reimpose sanctions on trade and investment to the area. Myanmar is also a large importer of weapons as well. Currently, we do not provide many arms to Myanmar, but the likes of Israel, India, France, and Germany have. We can work collaboratively with these governments in order to cut off Myanmar's ability to get weapons. With all of this on the table, the Myanmar government would be more inclined to fix their system and allow the Rohingya Muslims to return home with a promise of no violence and a guarantee of basic human rights. If Myanmar does not accept, they will quickly fall back into being an underdeveloped country because the sanctions placed on them would quickly restrict any economic growth. However, not only should the United States help to urge Myanmar to change, we should also give aid to Bangladesh and help the 800,000 Rohingya refugees that are already there. Thank you.